Hi, greetings to all, and to Mr. Yi. I'm Si Jing, the leader of the Group 2 from the Macroeconomic Group Assessment, and today we're going to share 3 topics to you. And so before we start for the sharing, please let me to introduce my partners, which is Ivolo Wang Ping, Chim Xuan and also Stanley Ching Kok Liao. And so let us start for the content.
This is the Singapore monthly inflation rate from January 2020 until April 2021. So in the chart, we can see from January 2020, the inflation rate is getting down, and in the April 2020 become the deflation rate. So in January 2021, the deflation rate is grow up back to the inflation rate. In April 2021, the inflation rate is up to 2.1.
As you can see from this slide, this is the analysis for the Singapore quarterly annual growth rate from July 2018 to March 2021. And we just focus for March 2020 to March 2021. And during this period, start from March 2020, there is drop to negative 13.2% in July 2020, which caused the lowest, which means the highest drop during this entire period. And after drop till that point, it bounced up, which means rise to 9% in October 2020 and caused the highest rise during this period. And afterwards, it drops back to 3.1% till March 2021.
For the part A, to the Singapore monthly unemployment rate, January 2020 to April 2021, so that it is rapidly increase and then decline slowly. To the graph, we know that the lowest unemployment rate in Singapore was between January 2020 and April 2020, and the higher unemployment rate in Singapore was between July 2020 and October 2020. That's all for the part A.
Good morning, teacher. Today I'm going to talk about the Singapore monthly labor force participation rate from January 2020 until March 2021. According to the most statistic, Singapore's population reached 5.7 million in June 2020. Singapore unemployment rate fell to 3.2% in January 2021. The Singapore's labor force participation rate rose to 68.1% in 2020, up from 68% in 2019. So, in the first quarter of 2021, the data estimates show that Singapore's labor market was still recovering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so far for the analysis to Singapore, we can conclude in a few points, which is, firstly, there is a hyperinflation happen for the current Singapore economic, which caused high cost of living to the Singapore citizen and also for the entire market. And however, that's good news for others, which are the growth rate for Singapore is still growing, is low, not much, but still growing. And for the unemployment rate, it is reducing, and which means they are solving the unemployed problem. And for lastly, for the LFPR, which means the labor force participant rate, is increasing, which means there is the numbers of the active workforce is increasing. So far, this is the analysis we have done to Singapore.
So how the Singapore graduates who plan to buy a house will be affected? There are 4 reasons. First, the cost of the living will affect the price of houses. When the cost of the living be high and the price of house also will getting higher. So for those who plan to buy a house will be more difficult. And the second reason is the change of the economy. Economic growth will cause the people earn more money, so they can get more money to buy the houses. The third reason is unemployed situation. When the people lose their work, they did not have any income. When they don't have income, they did not have many money or enough money to buy the houses. And the last reason is nowadays the COVID-19 pandemic caused many people lose their work or hard to find work. So they can't have more income to buy the houses.
So through the analysis I've done in part A, we know about the current change for the Singapore economy. So by the change of the Singapore economy, what will the effect to the cafe outlet owner in Singapore? So it will affect to the earned decision and also the business income, and last but not least, the number of competitive. But how will it affect to it? And so in the analysis, we know about hyperinflation happened in the recent Singapore economic. And by the happen of hyperinflation, the high cost of living is happened in the market, which will cost the raw material like coffee beans and also the machinery and also the raw material for the business extension will be increased in a very high cost. And by the happen for it, the owner will be reconsideration when they are purchasing the raw material, the machinery, and also when they are considered to have a business extension during this kind of period. And so it will affect the owner decision for it. And so for the business income, during this period, the business income will be low due to the unemployment rate and also due to the growth of the economy. By the growth of the economy, when the increase of the economy, it will increase the income for the cafe, and obviously by the decrease for the drop for the growth, it will decrease the sales for the cafe as well. And so same to the unemployment rate. When the unemployment rate is increased, it will cause people to have less buying power, since many people is losing their job and being unemployed. And obviously when the employment rate is decreased, people will have more extra buying powers to buy extra things except for their basic need. And so through the analysis had done in the part A, we can know about there is a drop for the unemployment rate, which is lucky to the Singapore, and which means people will have extra buying power to buy extra things except for the basics. And so for the growth, there is a happen for a drop for the growth, but luckily it's grow back, is raised back, and is being stable for currently, which means the citizen will have, the household will have more buying power to buy the extra thing they want. And so last but not least, for the number of competitive, by the effection, by the change of the FFPR, which means the labor force participant rate, the increase for it will create the more active workforce to find job, and by decrease, the workforce will be less. And by the increase for it, as we can see in part A, there is the increase in the end. So by the increase, it might create a competitive in the cafe market, since nowadays people are dream to being their own boss. So it might possible to happen to increase the cafe, the competitive for the cafe outlet owner. So these are all the points for the affection for the cafe outlet owner in Singapore, and how will it affect them?
So how Singapore low-income worker will affect cost of living? Cost of living will affect low-income worker survival. It's because the country cost of living is depending on the change in inflation and deflation in the country. Firstly, to the Singapore monthly inflation rate graph, from January to April, January 2020 to April 2021, we know that inflation happening is from April to December 2020. So during this period, the cost of living will decrease because it is bad economy. Everyone's spending less. As we know that Singapore is a high consumption country. So during deflation period, daily expenses will be reduced. So that for this situation, lower income worker expenses will be reduced. But at the same time, they will also face this risk of being let off, because bad economy, the organization also need to cut costs. Lastly, inflation was happening in January 2021 to April 2021. It is representative. Everyone has strong spending power and it will affect cost of living increase. So that for this situation, during this period, lower income worker can't afford the expenses because the cost of living increase, but the salary is not increased or maintaining. Thank you. How Singapore low income worker been affect country economic growth? Through the quarterly annual growth rate show us the Singapore lowest GDP rate was negative 13.2. Through the result, we know that during this period, the country economy is bad and not too much opportunity giving low income worker to performance to let them promote or improve their value. And the most higher GDP rate is 9. During this period, it is represented the Singapore people have a strong consumption power, so that it can affect the country economy. At the same time, also affect low-income worker have a great opportunities to earning more income or performance in other project. Yeah, that's all for the how Singapore low-income worker been affect economic growth. Thank you. How Singapore low-income worker been affect unemployment rate? The most higher unemployment rate was between July to October 2020. It is 3.6. The graph show us during that period, most people are losing job, and also due to the impact of the COVID-19 and increase the unemployment rate. So that the lower income worker also need to worry about it. The organization will let off them to cut costs. So this so that it will cause unemployment risk increase. Thank you. How Singapore low income worker been affected in labor force participation rate? According the Singapore labor force participation rate year 2020, it is 68.1%. Through the graph, we know that Singapore labor force market was still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic because finding job number of people are higher, so that it will affect low income worker will face increased competitive. It is likely when those people are getting a job to join the organization. The lower income worker need to perform performance well in the organization. If not, they will be die out. Thank you. That's all for the part B for my part. Thank you.
How Singapore's government been affected by the cost of living? High living costs may lead to an increase in crime. So a significant increase in the cost of living has the potential lead to bribery, which is at the heart of corruption. As a result, the Singapore's government suffers a negative impact. On the other hand, the rising of cost of living makes it more difficult for a person to maintain a certain standard of living. How Singapore's government been affected by growth? When the price of education, food, healthcare, and other goods and services rising, it affects the entire economy, including government spending. Inflation affects the entire economy including the cost of living, the cost of doing business, the cost of borrowing money, mortgage, corporate, and government. For example, government investment on building new roads or increased spending on welfare, which increase disposable income. How Singapore's government been affected by labor force participation rate? According to the data above, Singapore's labor force participation rate increased from 68% in 2019 to 68% in 2020. It is a positive sign for Singapore's government because the larger the labor force, the higher the government taxes revenue can be. And taxes help the country to develop more rapidly. Last but not least, how Singapore government been affected by unemployment. As I stated before, Singapore's unemployment rate fell to 3.2% in January 2021. Unemployment reduced economic activity and has a negative impact on the federal government. And by that, the government ability to generate, it affect the government to generate the revenue. When the unemployment is high, people pay less taxes to the government. At the same time, it means that fewer people have income to spend on goods and services.
For the Malaysia next 5-year development, we are focusing on rebuilding tourism. The reason why we choose rebuilding tourism, because tourism service industry is one of the major and popular income in Malaysia. From the chart, we can see that the Malaysia major economy came from the services activity. Tourism is one of the part services activity. So tourism will bring more visitors and help our country economy grow up. Why many people will choose to visit our country? Our country is a multicultural country. Each races have their own culture. This is our country feature. For example, Baba Nyonya is one of the famous culture in our country. Malaysia also have a good geography location in our planet. In addition, our country also have some world heritage. For example, Gunung Mulu Nation Park, Kinabalu Nation Park, and many. All these will become our country tourism places and will attract many people to visit our country. When many people travel to our country income also will be more. From the picture, we can see that our country income is increased year by year because many visitors visit to Malaysia and cause our country income become more.
For Malaysia next 5-year development, we are not focused on developing new agriculture technology in Malaysia, although agriculture is one of the major and also popular product that produced by Malaysia and export to other countries. But however, that is in past year. In nowadays, other countries, example like Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, they also have their own agriculture system and also agriculture technology to produce those agriculture and export. So compared to the past year and also nowadays market, it's not so important to focus for it. Moreover, for nowadays market, Malaysia is export and also produce more like electronic and also palm oil, rubbers, and export to other country. So compared to past year and nowadays, it is not so important to focus on the agriculture technology.
So for the part C, why Malaysia government not focus on improving labor skill? Due to the rapid development of the technology industry. In recent years, labor skill jobs have gradually been replaced by the machinery. So the most important thing is that machinery can save a lot of cost, labor costs, and the workload can be more than human. So the Malaysia government should not develop labor skill anymore. Thank you. That's all for my part C. Thank you, everyone.
If I were the Prime Minister in Malaysia, I will not strengthening the health sector of Malaysia in the next 5 years. Instead of strengthening the health sector of Malaysia, I will recommend to rebuilding of tourism in Malaysia over the next 5 years, because tourism has proven to be the most effective priority export sector. As you can imagine, if we strengthening the health sector of Malaysia, not everyone will come to Malaysia to cure disease. Because if I were a consumer, if I want to cure the disease, I will choose a more modern country to cure the disease, like Singapore and China. Thank you.
And that's all for our presentation. And thank you for watching for our presentation. And thank you and adios. And have a nice day to you and stay safe. Thank you.